الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنام محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين ما خاب من تمسك بكم أمين من لجأ إليكم سادتي سيدي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة لأندبنك صباحا ومساء ولأبكين عليك بدل الدموع دما يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال تعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكذلك نري إبراهيم ملكوت السماوات والأرض وليكون من الموقنين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Please recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Samahat al-Shaykh, respected brothers and respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we go through life, one of the questions that we continuously ask ourselves is, what's my purpose? Everyone is looking for belonging. Everyone is looking for reason. Everybody wants to know what their purpose of existence is. And this is not something that only the Muslims ask themselves, but every single human at one point in their life asks themselves this simple question, which is, why am I here? What's the reason of my existence? For us who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we want to know what the reason for our existence is, it's very simple. We go back to the holy book, our Quran, and we go back to the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt, salamullah alayhim ajma'in. And there we'll find a complete methodology, a complete manhaj, if you will, of the reason of existence and the reason and the purpose for why we are here. When looking at any subject, our first marja, if you will, the first thing that we go back to is always the Holy Quran, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This book gives you a skeleton. This book draws you the map of what needs to happen, of what you need in your life. And what adds flesh to that skeleton, what gives more detail to that map, are the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Coupled together, they will give you a clear indication and they will give you the reply to this question that you ask yourself. When we ask ourselves this question, as many of us have, and we go back to the Holy Quran, there's one ayah that always pops up, especially in these discussions, I'm sure you're aware. People ask, what's the reason for us being here? What's the purpose of my life? They go back to the Holy Quran, they see an ayah. They believe that this ayah gives them the truth and the complete picture of what they are made to do, what they've been made to do. And the ayah states clearly, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجَنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So we believe in Islam, or our understanding so far is that it's very simple. it's very easy, it's very clear. I have been created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here we stop and we say, Alhamdulillah, now we know what we've been created to do, we've been given our purpose. But when we sit down and we look at this ayah, and no one's questioning the ayah, because here we're not talking riwayat, sanad da'if, sanad qawli. No, this is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's absolute, it's truth. Nobody can question it. Nas sarih, Quran. You've been created to worship. But we can analyze this in two ways. One, we can say this is the purpose, khalas. Or we can say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, He did create us to worship. But that doesn't necessitate that the worship is the purpose of my creation. How does that work? I'll tell you now. We always say about the religion of Islam, Inna al-Islam deen al-fitra. That our religion is the religion of the innate. And fitra is what? Man's primitive nature. And this is something that we all share. Yani my fitra and your fitra and everyone's fitra that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in, the innate nature of us, is all the same. Our understanding, when we go back to our innate nature, is all the same. Our religion goes hand in hand to what is deemed acceptable by our fitrah. Our religion doesn't go against the fitrah. For example, my fitrah tells me that I need to live a life with a partner. It's human nature. A man needs a woman needs a man. Did Islam come and say, for example, marriage is haram? Did it go against the fitrah? No. It agrees with the fitrah. It gives us rules and legislations and regulations to tell us how or what the halal way of doing things is. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, if we accept that Islam is the religion of fitrah, is the religion of the innate, then we have to ask ourselves, what does our innate tell us about ourselves? Put the spiritual sense on one side. Talk to me now about the materialistic world. All of you are living, studying, working. What do you find a common thing between everyone in your fitrah, in your innate nature? That you are always trying to seek completion. In Arabic they say al-takamul. The ulama of akhlaq say that an individual, in every action he does, he's always reaching for takamul, completion. How does that look like? If you own a business, when you make your first £1,000,000, do you stop or do you say, no, I want to make another £1,000,000? If you're a muwaddaf, if you are an employee, are you happy to be an employee or do you want the promotion? You want to become a manager, then a store manager, then a regional manager, وإلى آخره. When you go to the gym, are you happy when you get a 4-pack or do you want a 6-pack مثلا? All of you laughing, you want a 6-pack مثلا, زين? Maulana, the same is true for our soul. So if we've accepted that, for example, one of our defining attributes that is part of our human nature, part of our fitrah, is to seek completion, then our soul also has this attribute. So when it comes to worship, is that it then? If I worship, I do my soul and my salah, and that's it, I've reached completion? Or actually, is my soul and my salah and my worship and my ibadat a means to an end? Is it the end or is it the means to an end? And our ulama say no. Yes, you've been created to worship, but that's not your purpose. Why? Because the worship is a wasila. It's a gateway. It's a bridge. It's something that you have to do in order to reach your purpose. So here we go back to the Holy Quran. Does it give us an indication? Does it tell us, okay, the Quran said that I've created you but to worship? What's the next step? If my worship is not my purpose, if my worship is a wasila to something else, what is that something else? We go back and ask the Holy Quran and it replies to us. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ Yaqeen. Worship your Lord until you reach certitude. This concept of yaqeen, of certitude, the ulama say, is the actual purpose of your existence. Why? Because this is how you reach completion. Now some of the mufassirin of Quran say that this ayah refers to the fact that you need to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until your death. يعني الموت هو اليقين. يعني you continue worshipping throughout your life. Other mufassirin say that this ayah is telling you, when you build upon the other ayah, that I have created you to worship, that your worship will allow you to reach a level that's known as yaqeen. It's a status. It's a status given to very few individuals. You know, in the army or in the police, they have status. Sergeant, staff sergeant, lieutenant, major, commander. Zien? It's the same with our soul. Our soul wants to level up. It wants to go from one level to another in order to reach closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's takamul. And they say that the highest level is the level known as yaqeen. So your worship, which you believe is the reason for your existence, is actually a means to an end. And the end is reaching the level of yaqeen, that what you're doing really when you're worshipping and you're doing your sawm and you're doing your salah is because you want to reach something. Just like when you're working very hard, it's not due to the work itself in your jobs, in your business, it's because you're trying to reach something else. When you go to the gym, you're trying to reach something. And that thing, the Quran is telling us, is known as yaqeen. Now here, there's a question usually somebody asks. Because some Muslims have taken this ayah out of context. They say, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ means that I have to worship Allah until I reach a status, and then because I'm so spiritual, I don't need to worship Allah anymore. But the answer to that ishkal, that query, is very simple. I speak to the younger individuals. If you're working out in the gym, and you're working your muscles, and you have something you want to reach, for example, I'm going to go back to the classic six-pack. You want to go for a six-pack. If you worked hard to get the six-pack and then you stopped working, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You're going to enter a place that it's very hard to leave. It's called, what? In Iraqi we call it Kirsh City. Yeah? You become overweight. And now you'll never be able to leave that place. Mawlana, if you believe, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ means that I'm going to worship till I reach that level. As soon as you stop, what's going to happen? All the way back down. That actually the trick is to maintain, to be consistent, to have discipline. That the ibadah never stops. That you continue on your journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something incredibly important, because in every single moment of our life, if we're not moving forward, what are we doing? We're moving backwards. Even those who believe you can stay still. Standing still is actually the first step in moving backwards. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, when he describes his Shia, he says that the individuals were always moving forward in the correct way. And that's why our worship, in any form it might be, whether it's through our furu' deen, whether it's through holding majalis, whether it's through serving our parents, always the end goal for our worship is trying to reach that status that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to us about in the Quran. So here, questions arise. The first question is, what is yaqeen? The second question, how do we achieve yaqeen? The third question is, has anybody achieved this status that we're talking about, that we're able to achieve mathalan? Here we go back to the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, and we see various riwayat that mention this topic in detail. And inshallah, I won't take too much time from Sama'at al-Shaykh, but I would like you to pay attention to this. The first riwayah is from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. They ask Imam al-Sadiq about the different levels of belief. He says the first level of belief is what? Al-Islam. That a person becomes a Muslim. What do you need so you can become a Muslim? He says you need your mouth. You say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and you become a Muslim. That is level 1. Yeah? That's what, مثلا, sergeant. How do you go from sergeant to lieutenant? What's level 2? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, Al-Iman. What do you need for Iman? The first step is I said I'm Muslim. The second step is I'm saying I'm Muslim but I have belief in Islam. And I show that through what? My actions. I'm doing my salah, I'm paying my khumurs. It's something I really believe in. This is Al-Iman. طبعا, some of the ulama of Ma'rifah say that if you want to achieve Iman, it's unattainable unless you say, Ashhadu anna Aliyan waliyullah. مولانا ذكر علي عبادة صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
The second level, Al-Iman. Then they asked the Imam, he said there's a third level. So now we go from lieutenant مثلا to commander. He said the third level is Al-Taqwa. Al-Taqwa يعني شنو? Al-Taqwa is piety. If I was to try to find a word in the English language most suited to Taqwa would be piety. But as a concept, it's God consciousness. So through the levels of belief that we're trying to reach, what did we say? Al-Takamul, completion, to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third level is Taqwa. They said to the Imam, Ya Aba Abdullah, why have you categorized them in this way? He says, because somebody can say the Shahadatain, but not have Iman. And many people have Iman, but they don't have Taqwa. They're not Muttaqeen. He said, yet there is a level higher than this. They said, what level is this? He says, this level is known as Al-Yaqeen. And it's أعلى درجات التقوى. It's one of the highest levels, or the highest level of belief, the highest level of piety. In another riwayah, Imam Ar-Ruwa alayhi salam puts it beautifully to us. He says, Al-Iman فوق al-Islam bidaraja. That having Iman is a level higher than Islam. Then he says, At-Taqwa فوق al-Iman bidaraja. That having Iman, having Taqwa is higher than Iman by one level. Then he says, Al-Yaqeen فوق al-Taqwa bidaraja. Here the companions asked him, they would say, what is Yaqeen, Ya Ibn Rasulullah? Here he wants to explain to them what Yaqeen is. He says that a person has full conviction in Allah. In Arabic he says, At-Taslim wal-Tawakkul ala Allah wal-Rida biqada' Allah wal-Tafweed ila Allah. That a person has full conviction in Allah, puts all his affairs in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and accepts everything that comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On these nights, the past 2 months, we've been remembering Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He's one of the individuals that reminds you, when I say that this is what yaqeen is, you think, oh, this is Aba Abdullah salamullah alayhi had yaqeen. So it becomes clear to us that al-yaqeen is having God's centricity in our life. That my life revolves around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything that I want to do, I have Allah in the forefront of my mind. When I want to get a job, I think about Allah. Will this please Him or not? When I go to university, I'm thinking of Allah. When I get married, I'm thinking of Allah. In every single moment of my life. And that's the defining attributes of the Anbiya, the Awsiya, the Imma alayhim salam. Now that we've understood what yaqeen is, you may have a question. You've told us the different levels of belief. But if I want to reach yaqeen, is yaqeen the same for everyone? Or does yaqeen also have levels? Yani, yaqeen is one thing, just one level that I reach it, or is it different? In the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us 3 categories of yaqeen. And they are categorized by ilmul yaqeen, then higher than that, Aynul yaqeen. Then higher than that, haqqul yaqeen. What's ilmul yaqeen? What's aynul yaqeen? What's haqqul yaqeen? In order for us to understand these, I'm going to give a small muqaddimah, a small introduction to the different types of knowledges. And inshallah with that, an analogy that will help us understand these three levels. Because this what we're talking about is what? The purpose for our existence. For if this is truly the purpose of our existence, then we need to know how this looks like. Now, why are we talking about knowledge? Because when it comes to seeking closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it cannot be done without knowledge. It has to always be done by people who have ilm, ma'rifah. For in order for us to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing we have to know is what type of knowledge is going to allow us to gain closeness to Allah. The ulama say that a normal human being will look at and analyze life in two different ways. If I wanted to, مثلا, explain to you what sugar is, then I can tell you sugar and the dictionary definition, white, granule, sweet in flavor. Now everyone here has an image of sugar in their mind of what the meaning of sugar is. But there's another way that you can know what sugar is. What's the way that you're going to know? مثلا, you be a bit naughty and you go and you stick your finger in the sugar, مثلا, and then you taste it. Now you have another type of knowledge of what sugar is. Is your understanding of sugar from the first aspect and the second aspect the same? La, it's not the same, not at all. The first is what we call ilm husuli, that which you gain through reading, through analysis. The second, we call it ilm hururi, that which you gain through, for example, experience or something internal. In both instances, you learn what sugar is, but in each instance it was different. A bit like the old analogy that people used to use, that when you have, for example, a son who's naughty. Alhamdulillah, my sons are not naughty, they're hafabin, they listen. But for example, if I was to tell Muhammad Hussein, my son, Baba, don't go next to the fire, it burns. In his mind now he knows that the fire, if he touches it, he'll burn. But if he was like somebody else who was very naughty, I tell him, don't put a finger in the fire. He goes and he puts his hand in the fire. He says, what's going to happen? He's going to get burnt. In either instance, he knows that he shouldn't. The first instance, he has an image in his mind that he knows this burns. The second, he got burnt. It's finished by these. There is no room for debate. He knows the fire is hot. If we've understood this, let's come and look at ilmul yaqeen, aynul yaqeen, wa haqqul yaqeen. One of the ulama of suluk and ma'rifah, he says to us that the best way to explain it is through the example of the fire inside a cave. This needs a bit of detail. So sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You enter a cave. Inside the cave is a fire. Before you see the flames, what do you see? You see the light of the fire. Maybe you see the smoke, you see the light on the walls. Do you have knowledge of the fire? Yes, I have knowledge of the fire. Have you seen the fire? No, I haven't seen the fire. This is called ilmul yaqeen. That you're basing your belief on something because you've seen the effects of it. As you continue in the cave, you finally see the flame. You see the flame. Here what do you have? You have aynul yaqeen. Now that you've seen the actual flame, not just the effects of it. Is there a difference between the first level and the second level? Yes. Then we have the third level. The third level, which is haqqul yaqeen. The first two levels was I saw the effect of the fire. كَلَّا لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عِلْمِ الْيَقِينِ. What does it say the ayah? لَتَرَوَنَّ الْجَحِيمِ. That if I tell you now, do good deeds because there's day of judgment. You've got knowledge now that there's day of judgment, there's nar, there's adab, there's hisab. What's the next step? ثم لترونها عين اليقين is what? Is you're in the day of judgment and you can see the fire. You're on Sirat al-Mustaqim and you can see the fire. That's a different time. Then Surah Al-Waqi'ah tells us إن هذا لهو حق اليقين. What حق اليقين? What is it explaining to us? What other level can there be? This is the one that we really need to pay attention. The alim says to me, if you take a metal rod, hadida, like this for example. One of the attributes of this metal rod is that it's solid. What's the attribute of fire? It's hot. Metal by itself, is it hot? No, it's not hot at all. But if I take that metal rod and I place it into the fire, what happens? It melts?
Yeah.
No, it's not going to melt. It's a strong piece of metal. What it's going to do is it's going to conduct the heat. When I remove that piece of metal, that hadida, what attribute does it have now? Heat. But in its essence, does it have heat? La, the essence of heat comes from what? From the fire. Haqqul yaqeen is what? Is that an individual has a level of knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifest through his actions. Like who? Like Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah Ra'ufun Rahim, Rasulullah shinu bil mu'minina Ra'ufun Rahim. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam reaches such a level that if you want to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you want to see the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sifat al-kamaliyah, al-rahmah wal-hikmah, all the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you look at Rasulullah and you see that he manifests or he embodies these things. Why? Because it's like the metal, when I put it into the fire, it took from the fire the heat and it started giving off heat. And Rasulullah, through his knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this high level of yaqeen, haqqul yaqeen. What does the ziyarah say? What do we read in ziyarah al-jami'ah? Man arafahum faqad qad arafa Allah. Through them you get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because they embody these traits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here you might ask me a question, Sayyidna. Is it possible to reach yaqeen? Can I reach yaqeen? Can you reach yaqeen? If we go back to the beginning of our conversation, we said that we're looking for the purpose of our existence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to us, worship me until you reach yaqeen. That means you can reach yaqeen. Zain, example. Can we have an example please of somebody who's not an imam? His father wasn't a prophet or an imam. He's not from the awsiya. Who reached yaqeen? The most obvious example for all of us. The companions of Imam al-Hussein salamullah alayhi. Ashab al-Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. That Shaykh al-Saduq in his book he narrates, he says, إِن كَشَفَ لَهُمِ الْغِطَاء, that they were able to see their status in heaven, that on the day of Ashura they would rush onto the battlefield. They would rush for shahada because they had that ilm, that yaqeen. Their ma'rifah was so high. And this is what the Quran alludes to. If you guys remember the ayah that we started with, وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. Allah saying to us that I showed Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Rasul, the Nabi, the Imam that he was, the Khalil of Allah, when he reaches this high level of Imamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows him the secrets of the cosmos. He begins to see beyond this realm, the malakut, the kingdom of Allah, the kingdom of the heaven and earth. Now you may ask, how? I remind you all that our haqiqah, our truth, is not this skin and bone and flesh. Our haqiqah is our ruh, the arwah. That through that we can have true knowledge. Through that we can see that which is beyond the unseen. And that's why when we talk about, for example, the concept of basira, is that something that enters my mind, my intellect. La. Something that enters my heart. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, غَمَّضْتُ عَيْنِي وَرَأَيْتُ فِي قَلْبِي. That an individual is able to see beyond this realm when they reach these high levels, when they reach towards completion and takamul, when they reach towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which is the purpose of our worship? Not worship for the sake of worship. Saum, salah, yaqum, yuq'ud, yurka', yusjud. No, you do that for this, not for the sake of the action itself. That you want to be in an eternal journey going close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now comes the question, how do we reach this status? What do we do to be able to be amongst those who have this ilm, who have this certitude, who have this certainty in their heart, this yaqeen? We give the example of Ashab Imam al-Hussein. Their fathers were not imams, their mothers were not like Fatima al-Zahra salamullah alayha. What differentiates them from me and you? What's that one defining factor? And as a foundation, so nobody's confused, Saum, Salah, Zakat, Humus, كل هذا مهم. That's all a given. Nobody's questioning that. We're speaking to a room of people, mashallah, alhamdulillah, Saimeen, Musallin, we don't have an issue with that. And they also used to pray and fast. That's not the defining quality, that's the minimum. We know that. We don't have an issue with that. We don't debate that. We don't question that. Here, what do we question? What did they do? One action. What did they do that we do ziyarah of them every year when we go to Karbala, mathalan? What did they do? And what do we need to do? They had complete submission. They had complete submission to the Imam of their time. That Aba Abdullah alayhi salam on the night of Ashura said to them, go to your families. This phone, they want me, they don't want you. They said no. تقتل نقتل. That is yaqeen, that is certitude. So my question to you is, do you have an imam of your time or do you not have an imam of your time? This is where we need to begin to think. Do we have yaqeen in the imam of our time or do we not? Do we think constantly of Sahib al-Zaman or do we not? In every action that we do we put Sahib al-Zaman in front of our eyes or do we not? Do we have ma'rifah of Sahib al-Zaman? When was the last time we read a book about Sahib al-Zaman? When we read بِأَبِي أَنْتَ وَأُمِّي يَا ابْنَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ to Imam al-Hussein, are that just words or is there some truth to it? Am I prepared to give up everything I have for Sahib al-Zaman or not? If he calls me tomorrow and tells me leave Cardiff, can I leave Cardiff or not? Change your job, can I change my job or no? These are questions we need to begin to ask ourselves. These days, many of the good Arabic literature has been translated to English. Kitab al-Nu'man مثلا. Kitab al-Ghayba. It's in English now, the book of occultation. So many of the A'lam have written and translated books into English. Sayyid Munir al-Khabbaz has a book of Imam Mahdi in English. Sayyid Riyad al-Hakim. Others. Grand scholars. Sheikh Baqir Sharif al-Qarashi has a whole encyclopedia. Each book on one Imam. Pick up the one about Sahib al-Zaman. That's the Imam of your time. Having ilm al-yaqeen is to see the effects of Sahib al-Zaman, which unfortunately we don't see. We think that that's it. He's in ghayba, there's no effect that he has on our lives. Ayn al-yaqeen is being like Allam al-Hilli or Allam al-Bahr al-Ulum. Actually having dialogue with the Imam, being able to see him. And haqq al-yaqeen as well is we begin to embody the sifat of Sahib al-Zaman. We do what he likes. We stay away from those things that he doesn't like. We show the world the beauty that is Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. Ruhi lahu al-fida. This purpose, if we begin to understand it, it will give us a roadmap. It will put the Lego blocks in place for our life. That I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I've created you to worship, so I worship. And I understand that Allah created me to worship so I can reach yaqeen. I put that as my goal. I look at those individuals in history, such as Ashab al-Imam al-Hussein, who reached this, and I begin to do what they did and stay away from what they didn't do. I begin to do the things that Sahib al-Zaman loves. Now here is the final question. Can you tell me, Sayyidina, one thing that Sahib al-Zaman loves? Imam Sayid gives us the clearest indication. He says, هل تجلسون وتتحدثون? Do you sit and remember us? إني أحب تلك المجالس. That these majalis bring joy to the hearts of the Imams. They bring joy to the heart of Sahib al-Zaman. احيوا أمرنا رحم الله من أحيا أمرنا. On nights like these, the hearts of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam is broken. Sahib al-Zaman and all the Ahlul Bayt remember the tragedy of Karbala. They asked Sayyid al-Mar'ash al-Najafi, what was the greatest calamity of the saga of Hussein? Was it when Abbas fell by the river with no hands? Or was it when Qasim was trampled by the horse? Was it when Ali al-Akbar was cut into pieces? The Sayyid says the moment and the true calamity of Ashura in one is Sayyidah Zainab Salamullah alayha. And everything that Sayyidah Zainab had to endure in Kufa and in Sham. They say that on a night, the wife of Yazid, Hind, said, I want to visit the captives. I want to know what happened. Who are these slaves downstairs that we have in our dungeon? So she would go as a queen, the wife of the Khalifa, with gold around her neck, necklaces, and servants by her side. They would bring her a chair, she would sit on that chair, while Sayyidah Zainab is sitting on the floor. She would say to Sayyidah Zainab, where are you from? She would say, from Medina. She would say, which Medina? There are many mudun. Which Medina are you from? She would say, أنا من مدينة رسول الله. She says, I am also from that Medina. Can you tell me about a house in Medina? I have a question about one of the houses of Medina. She says, what question do you have, oh lady? Ask what you wish. She says, tell me about the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. She says, why do you want to know about the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib? She says, I want to know about the children of Ali. Where are they now? Where is Hussein? Where is Zainab? Sayyidah Zainab, the children begin to cry. She says, if you want to see Hussein, his head is on the top of this palace. And if you want to see Zainab, I am Zainab. أنا زينب اللي يحجون عني ولا أنا زينب اللي يحجون عني سليت المصايب ما سلني مصاب حسين الدوهنني طاحن على عيوني وعمني. Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, before she would leave the captivity of Sham, she would tell Zayn al-Abidin, she would say, get us a house where I can sit and mourn my brother Hussein. And this house reminds me of another house in Medina, yes? Bayt al-Ahzan of Fatimah al-Zahra, where she would sit and mourn Rasulullah. Sayyidah Zainab would begin the majalis of her brother, she would begin to cry. The prison guards would bring the heads of the shuhada, one after the other. They give them the first head, the head of Ali al-Akbar. Layla goes and takes the head and begins to cry. She says, oh my handsome son, what have they done to you? The second head they bring is the head of Qasim. Ramla goes and takes the head of Qasim and says, oh my son, I will never get to see your wedding day. And she begins to cry. Then they bring the head of Abbas. Kulthum takes this head and cries. She says, I have things to say to my brother today, yes? Until they bring the head of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, the Imam of the time. Sayyidah Zainab goes, she says, this head is for me. She takes the head of Hussein, she sits in front of the head, she cries, she says, oh Hussein, do you know what has happened to me, wa Husseina? Until they bring two more small heads. Fidda would say that Sayyidah Zainab was crying with the head of her brother. The prison guards would call out, is there no one to come and collect these heads? Where is the mother? Has she died? Fidda goes and collects the head of Aoun or Muhammad. She says, no, but the mother needs to cry for her brother right now. And it's as if the poet says that she would remember the children when she finally goes back to Medina. She would enter her home. She would go inside the bedroom of her children. She would see the bed and the furniture and she remembers them. She begins to cry for her sons. Abdullah enters. He said, oh lady, who are you? How can you be in the house of Zainab? She says, Abdullah, ana Zainab al-Kubra. What has Sham done to me that you do not recognize me? ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. اللهم بفاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها يا الله شاف المرضى اقض حوائج المحتاجين عجل في ظهور صاحب العصر والزمان تقبل منا هذا العمل القليل بأحسن قبولك يا الله ولا أرواح موتى المؤسسين والحاضرين وموتى شيعة أمير المؤمنين رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة تسبق الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.